Hello, Sarah of SEK Handmade here, and today we're going to talk about adding fringe. This is such a fun way to finish up so many different kinds of projects. If you have found it a tedious task in the past, I have all the tips and tricks to make it easy and gorgeous. Let's go. All right, first let's talk about the tools you will need to create your fringe. The first thing you need is your project. You can add fringe to all sorts of projects. It's a really fun finishing. I'm going to show you, this is a coaster here, the post-stitch coaster, and I'm going to add some fringe onto the stitches at the beginning and the end. And so you need your project, whatever it is. And then you need yarn. Guys, be creative with this. This can be a really fun way to add some unexpected details to your project. I have obviously the exact same yarn that I used in my project, but this is a fun way to add a different color really simply. You could also even add a yarn that is a different weight and have some really big chunky fringe, or wrap up several strands of a lighter weight yarn and have a really light fluffy fringe. Really just try some different things, think outside the box. Really fun way to use up some scraps of yarn as well. So your project, your yarn, I'm just keeping mine in place in a little bowl here. You're going to want a nice sharp pair of scissors for sure. And then I keep heavy duty cardboard. I think this guy actually came out of a set of sheets that I bought. This was like the cardboard in the middle holding it together. You can see it's really nice and thick and super sturdy. Cut a nice sturdy piece of cardboard to the size of the fringe you want. You're looking at length, and you can use that. But one of my favorite tips is to go and find a hardcover book a little bit longer than the fringe you want to make. And here's the reason that I love a hardcover book. One, it's super sturdy. You're not going to bend it. And sometimes when you're wrapping the yarn around, what you're wrapping it around can flex, causing the length of the fringe, the yarn you're wrapping, to change. So then you can end up with some really long and really short pieces. But with a book, it's not going to do that. And then if we look at the side here, it's got that nice little valley between the two hard covers, and that makes it super easy to cut your fringe apart right along there. So super simple tip, get a hardcover book. Just a little notebook, or if I'm making fringe for a larger project, I love, like, you know, Dr. Seuss books or those kind of books. The hardcover kids books can be a good length for a nice longer fringe. So either a heavy duty piece of cardboard or a small hardcover book. Now, I don't think that this next tool is optional, but if you don't have one, you don't have to go get one. And that is a steamer. I love my steamer. I use it all the time. Of course, I am a professional yarn crafter, so that could be why. But if you don't have a dedicated steamer, you can also use the steam function on your iron. Always be super careful. It's really easy to burn yourself with both a steamer and the steam setting on an iron. So be very careful with that. And this one is definitely optional, but super duper helpful. And that is a rotary cutter. So for a rotary cutter, you're going to need several pieces. You're going to need the cutting mat, the ruler, and the rotary cutter. Rotary cutters are a great tool that can be found at lots of craft stores. They're usually thought of to be used for quilting. I actually don't do quilting, but I find them great for cutting fabric and yarn. do be super careful. Rotary cutter blades are very, very sharp, and you don't want to cut yourself. Also, I recommend keeping this up away from children if you have children. And store it someplace where you aren't just rooting around in the drawer, because I have absolutely cut my finger or a knuckle on the blade even when it's locked by rustling around in a drawer. Definitely don't want to do that. No fun. And that's the tools that you need. Oh, I almost forgot. You also need a crochet hook. This is maybe not a super necessary tool. You could try to pull through with a knitting needle or something else, but a crochet hook, the hook obviously is just perfect for grabbing that yarn and pulling it through the end of your work to create the fringe. This does not have to be fancy though, so if you are not a crocheter, go out and buy an inexpensive crochet hook at a craft store. They can be very inexpensive, like even $1 or $2 depending on what brand you buy. And I find that unless you're working with super bulky yarn, a slightly smaller crochet hook makes it really easy to get in between your stitches to pull your fringe through. The next thing you're going to want to do is determine how long you want your fringe. And this is going to change what you use to wrap your yarn around to create the fringe. You're going to get a length of, because my book is thicker, about double the length, because we're going to wrap it all the way around and we're going to cut on one end. But to make your fringe, you're going to fold that yarn in half. So this will be about the length of your final fringe. The tricky part is, or not tricky part, but I guess just like a little tip, is that you always need to trim the end of your fringe. So it's always better to go a little longer with the length of your fringe than shorter, because you can always trim some off, but you can't make it any longer once you've cut it. So another little pro tip, I love to have little ceramic bowls around to put my ball of yarn in, because then when you pull it, it doesn't roll away. It just rolls around in the yarn bowl. So what you're going to do is you're going to take the end of your yarn and you're just going to hold it at the end of your book with your thumb. Probably not a terrible idea to give yourself a little extra. Again, that can all be trimmed later. Oh, I almost forgot. You're going to want to count to see how many pieces of fringe you need. So you also need to decide, do you want to put one piece of fringe in each stitch, or do you want to put 2 or 3 in each stitch? For this project, I think I'm just going to do 1. So let's take a look at the end of my project here. I'm going to count. I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 stitches at the end there. So I'm going to make 14 pieces of fringe, because like I said, I'm just going to put 1 in each. So I'm going to just wrap all the way around my book 14 times. Honestly, I like to do 1 or 2 extra just to be sure. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. You do not, it doesn't matter if they line up on top of each other. Again, the length of these do not need to be super accurate. You're going to trim your end. Again, does not need to be super accurate. And then you're going to turn your book so that the spine, or so that the end faces up, sorry, the spine faces down. And you're just going to take your sharp scissors and you're going to trim all of those, and each one then will give you 1 piece of fringe. Super easy to do when you've got that edging of the hardcover book. So that's for one side of my coaster. So I'm going to go ahead and do it again for the other side so that I have 14 to go on the other side too. All right, the one thing I will say is that you do want to be careful to not be stretching your yarn over whatever you're wrapping around, because it will bounce back when you cut it, and you're going to end up with shorter fringe than you had hoped, which may or may not be a problem. But I have before been in a hurry and wrapped super fast and gotten them really tight and ended up with, you know, my fringe significantly shorter than what I wanted. So that is all the pieces of fringe I need for both sides of my coaster. And so I'm done with my book. I'm going to set it aside. I'm done with my scissors for now as well. When you are adding fringe to a project, you want the right side of your project facing up. Now, my coaster is the same on both sides, so it doesn't matter. But if your project has a right side or a wrong side, I find this to be really common if you're adding fringe to a scarf. A lot of times those may have a right side or a wrong side, or a shawl will often have a right side or a wrong side too. Whatever you're adding it to, you want your right side of your fabric facing up. Then is when you're going to need your crochet hook. You're simply going to, with your right side facing up, place your hook through the bottom of your project or through the bottom stitch. So I work into the back bump when I start my projects, so my top and my bottom end up looking exactly the same. And so you can see I've stuck it right through that stitch. Then I'm going to take a piece of yarn that I've cut. I'm going to line up my ends. Don't stress about this. This does not need to be perfect, because again, you're going to trim the ends when you're done. So if your ends aren't perfect, this is not the thing to get caught up on. Then you're going to take the loop, place it around your crochet hook, pull the loop through your fabric. Then I like to open that loop up with 2 fingers, grab that yarn with my 2 fingers, pull, and then I like to hold on to the edge of my fabric, because sometimes I find that this can stretch the fabric a little bit if you're not careful. And then you just want to tighten so that that loop is right up there at the top of your fabric. That's what's going to hold it secure. You don't need to yank super hard, but a nice secure loop is a great idea. And then you're just going to repeat that all the way across and all the way on the other side. Right side of your fabric facing up, stick your hook through the next stitch, line up your ends, loop it over the crochet hook, pull it through your stitch, open it up with 2 fingers, grab the ends, holding your edge, tighten it up. And then I like to just try to make sure that I get my ends all looking uniform there, and tighten similarly so that those ends look the same. And then you just keep on going. Last 2 here. I do want to give you a couple quick tips here. 1, grab your loop and hold it tight, and then the hook, my crochet hook is facing up now. When I go through my loop, I turn it, or through my stitch, I turn it down, and that makes it pull through nice and easy. If you're a crocheter, you probably do that naturally, but if you're not and you're using a crochet hook for the first time, or you just don't do it as regularly, that might not be as intuitive to you. Also, I have a video, if you are a crocheter, of how to work a single crochet edge around a project. That's a great way to make sure that you have nice even stitches to work into, but you absolutely do not have to have stitches to work into to add fringe to a project. You can just work into the sides of any project to add your fringe. Not a big deal. You can see I have an extra one. Also not a big deal. I'm not going to count, but if you wanted to, you could count both sides just to make sure you have the same number. Now, if this is where you typically stop with your fringe and then you wonder why it doesn't look quite as professional or perfect as other people's fringe, I'm going to give you 2 tips that are going to super easily make your fringe look amazing. And the first one is the steamer. Now you can make a judgment call on this. If you look at my pieces of yarn here, you can see on both sides they're very straight. And so I wouldn't necessarily steam this project, but a lot of times when you get further down into a ball of yarn, it can end up a little wavy, and I think it looks really nice when your fringe is super straight. So if you find that your yarn is a little wavy on your fringe, go ahead and add a little steam. If you've got a lot of patience and you don't have a steamer, you can spritz it with a little water and straighten it all out. Then you will need to let it dry completely. Whether you're steaming or spritzing with water, you need to let it dry completely. That's how it will hold its nice straight shape. Then the last thing you need to do is you need to decide how long you want your fringe and you need to trim it. My number 1 recommendation for getting really straight fringe super easily is to use the rotary cutter, which I'll show you here in just a second. But you can also just use a ruler. Depending on how long you want your fringe, just lay your fringe pieces out nice and flat. Lay your ruler down and then very carefully trim along the edge of that ruler. And if you don't even have a ruler, you can just use something that's straight. This is a little more challenging, I will admit. Probably worth spending a couple bucks on a ruler to make it easier, especially if you are trimming lots of fringe. But the rotary cutter makes this so easy. So after you've put your fringe on, after you've steamed it, if it's wavy, then you're going to trim, and I'm going to show you how to do it with the rotary cutter. All right, one of the things that makes this so easy is the fact that the mat that you cut on, and you must cut on a mat if you're using a rotary cutter, because the rotary cutter is super sharp and you will just go right through your table or any fabric you have underneath it. So really important to use the mat, but you can see this mat has grid lines. So I can line up the end, my final row, or the end of my tassels, at the end of my fringe, sorry, straighten it out nice and flat, line it up on the grid, and then I can say, I want this fringe to be, I think I'm going to say 2 inches. So 2 inches. Then I'm just going to take my rotary ruler, line it up on the grid with the 2 inches. I like to put some pressure to really flatten everything out. Then I'm going to engage my rotary cutter, run it across that end, and you guys, ta-dam! It's so easy. It's so fun. And then I know I did 2 inches there. I can do the same thing over here. Line up my end, straighten out all my fringe. I like to have it nice and flat, just because then it makes sure that they all get the same length. 2 inches, line up my ruler, and roll it on over. And there you go. Thank you so much for joining me today. I can't wait to see all the ways you let your creativity flow, adding fringe to your projects. It is always my goal to help you grow confidently in your craft. If you felt this video did this, I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel, turn on notifications, like this video, and share it with a friend who you think might like to add some fringe easily to one of their projects. Check out the description below for links to other helpful videos and a supply list. Thank you again for joining me today, and happy crafting!